Hello! So they finally let me in the bone room for a couple of hours. So I thought I'd start off by working with the skeleton. Hello, this is our skeleton. And I'm just going to go over just real quickly just the main parts of the skeleton and the planes. So first of all, all a plane is, don't let that word scare you, all a plane is, it just means the cut line. Like if I were to cut this way down the center of the skeleton, then that would be a plane, and open it up, that would be a plane. And I have a model right here. See, this is Mr. Head, and so Mr. Head is cut right down the middle like that. So I can separate and see he's cut right down the middle. So this would be a plane. The cut line would be a plane. And down the middle is what we call the sagittal plane. That's sagittal with two T's. And if you cut side to side this way, if you would cut Mr. Skeleton at the waist, or up here, or anywhere, up here too. Oh, he's screwed on. That would be transverse. You're going to run into the word transverse a lot in your terminology. Just know that transverse just means side to side. It sticks out like this. So a transverse cut would be side to side like this. And then oblique, you're going to run into the term oblique, especially with muscles. Oblique just means diagonal. That's all it means. So anytime you run into the word oblique, just know that it's running diagonal. So an oblique plane would be if you were to cut like from the shoulder down to the waist in a diagonal plane, that would be an oblique plane. And that's all that means. But you're going to run into those terms again and again. And check out my vocabulary pages on Google Drive. If you don't have that link, please email me or text me and I'd be happy to send it to you. So we're just going to go over the basics right now on the skeleton. What you need to know is that there are two sections of the skeleton. There's the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Now, axial skeleton just means everything in the middle, everything that's connected to the spinal cord, you know, your ribs, everything that's part of your body is your axial. Think of it this way. It's the axis. Your spinal cord would be the axis. So your spinal cord would be considered your axis. And see, let's turn him around. See your spinal cord? That would be your axis of the skeleton. So everything coming off the axis is your axial skeleton. So your ribs coming off the spinal cord are part of your axial skeleton. Your head, everything. Now your limbs, woohoo, your limbs are hanging out here. They're not really connected to your axis, right? So your limbs are called the appendicular skeleton. So your arms and your legs are the appendicular skeleton. And if you think appendix and how you can get your appendix removed, it's extra. These are extra on top of the axial skeleton. I don't know if that helps you remember or not. That's just how I remember. So appendicular skeleton, axial skeleton. Okay? Now I'm going to start off with just the basic anatomical landmarks for the skeleton, and then in other videos I'm going to get specifically into each individual bone and each feature of the individual bones. But right now, this video, this is just the basics, just to acquaint you with the skeleton so you don't feel so lost, okay? It's because I know it's a lot, and it's especially a lot when you're trying to do this from home and you can't come into the bone room. So I'm just going to try to go through this as simply as possible for you. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or text me, or you can comment under the comment section on YouTube. Okay, so obviously the head, we have the cranium, which is where your brain's kept. Okay, you have the cranium, you have the facial bones, this whole thing together, the cranium and the facial bones, that's called the skull. So easy peasy, right? Now, your associated bone, your bones that are associated with the skull, with the cranium and the facial bone, are your auditory ossicles and your hyoid bone. Now, your hyoid bone, if I can turn this guy's head, see on his neck right here, there's this little bitty looking, it looks like a vampire teeth that you'd wear for Halloween, and it's sticking out in the front of the neck. That's right here, kind of where your Adam's apple is a little bit. That's not your Adam's apple, that's just a bone that's right near it. That's your hyoid bone, and that's what your tongue is attached to. So your tongue goes all the way back and it's attached to that. And your hyoid bone has a whole bunch of different muscles you'll get into when you study the muscles section. The muscles lab section is attached to the hyoid bone. So you need to know the hyoid bone and also your auditory ossicles. You can't see on the skeleton because turning the skeleton this way, right here is his ear hole. Inside the ear, you have 3 small, teeny tiny bones. They're the smallest bones in your whole body, and they're called the auditory ossicles. Now, auditory, that means you hear with it, right? Auditory. So those are your hearing bones. Those are the bones that vibrate the sound waves and tell your brain what to hear. Now, the auditory ossicles are inside the ear, so you don't see them on the skeleton. You're not really going to get into that too much until you get into the special senses when you study the ear, but I'll show you. Here is an ear, right? Here's your ear. This white section up here, that's inside your skull. This is all inside your skull. So here's your ear, here's your skin. This is the outside. So if you take this front piece off, and I take this top piece off, there are these little tiny bones. Here's your tympanic membrane. And right on here, oops, right on here, if you see this little, it looks like a Monopoly piece or something, this little game piece, that's one of your auditory ossicles. And the other 2 are connected to your eardrum, your tympanic membrane. These little bones sticking out on the top, those are your auditory ossicles. They're called the malleus, incus, and stapes. The malleus, or malleus, some people say, the malleus is attached to your eardrum. I don't know if you can see that. And then attached to the malleus is the incus. And then that incus attaches to the stapes, or the stapes, however you want to pronounce it. This little, just this tiny piece. Just this tiny piece right here. It looks like an arch. That is your stapes, or stapes. Okay, so those are the auditory ossicles, and those are inside your ear. They're the 3 smallest bones in your body. Okay, now down to your thoracic cage. Your thoracic cage is just what it sounds like. It's this cage-looking thing that's made by your ribs. So everything in this section is your thoracic cage. Now your diaphragm would be right here at the bottom of your ribs. So everything above your diaphragm and in the ribs are your thoracic cage. If it's below the diaphragm, that is your abdominal cavity. And then your pelvic cavity goes below that. Sometimes we say this all together as the abdominopelvic cavity. But this is your thoracic cage, your thoracic cavity, and it has the ribs. And the front here, this little, it looks like a little necktie, is your sternum. That's your breastplate. On the top of this sternum, it looks like the top of it is shaped like a little heart. That's your manubrium. And at the very bottom of the sternum, there's this little pointy tip that is called your xiphoid process. Here are your collarbones, right here. And of course, this is your vertebra. I mean, duh, who doesn't know that? That's your vertebra. And your vertebra goes all the way up in here. And let me turn him around. See, your vertebra goes all the way up into the base of your skull right here. So while we're back here, these little wings, I always think of them as angel wings on either side. That's, your shoulder blade. That's called your scapula. So scapula, vertebra, ribs. Now, about the ribs, there are 3 types of ribs. There are true ribs, false ribs, and floating ribs. So the true ribs, as you can see right here, they attach directly to the sternum. Those are your true ribs. Now then it gets a little bit messy down here, and you can see this is cartilage. This other colored part is cartilage, and this cartilage comes way out, and the ribs are no longer really attached to the sternum. They're attached to pieces of this cartilage that kind of fans out. Those are your false ribs. And then way down at the bottom here, you see these ribs that don't come around, that don't attach to anything at all. They're attached to the vertebra back here, but they come around. Those are your floating ribs because they float. They don't attach to your sternum in any way or any cartilage. Now, your vertebral column includes your vertebrae, vertebrae, one's plural and the other singular. So a vertebra would be one piece. The vertebrae is the whole thing. It goes all the way down until it gets down to like your pelvic area. And your pelvic area has your sacrum and your coccyx. And your coccyx is your butt bone. That's your tailbone that you do not want to fall on. If you fall down, it hurts. That's your coccyx. It sticks out at the very bottom. And let me see if I can. There we go. So here's your vertebrae. Here's your sacrum. This whole thing inside of your pelvis. Now don't get that confused with these pelvic elephant ear looking things sticking out to the side. This is your pelvic girdle. But inside here, your vertebral column turns into the sacrum. And this is still part of your vertebral column. And then at the very end, this little point sticking out of here is the coccyx. That's your tailbone. I think that's it. So for just showing you where these specific bones are, just in general, as a general idea for the skeleton. So maybe this will help you not feel so lost when you're going through all those diagrams. And you're like, the sacrum, what's the sacrum? The sacrum's just the bottom of your vertebrae. And the sacrum, actually, when you're born, that's still little pieces of vertebrae. That's still individual vertebrae. It's not until you get older that that all fuses together and becomes one sacrum. So that really truly is part of your vertebrae. And the coccyx is the little tailbone on the very bottom of the sacrum. Okay? So as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to email or text me or leave a comment down here. Please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time, and I'll go over specific features of each bone for you in different videos, hopefully shorter videos than this one. Okay?